Alright, we're going to be talking about a really important skill in math today. The reason this is important is because we're going to use this foundational skill in a lot of the other concepts that we'll be learning in 5th grade math. That is the concept of least common multiple. Least common multiple is used in a lot of different areas, but especially in fractions, because we use least common multiple to help us find least common denominator. So today we're going to learn least common multiple, and I'm going to show you two methods to find least common multiple. One of the methods is called the list method. The list method allows us to compare a couple of different numbers and determine what the least common multiple is. Before we start, let's consider what a least common multiple is. A least common multiple refers to the multiple that is common to the numbers that you're comparing, let's say 12 and 18 for example, a multiple of 12 and a multiple of 18 that they have in common. And you might be thinking, well, they have a lot of multiples in common. I can think of a lot of numbers that 12 and 18 will both go into. That's true, but we're looking for the smallest one. That's what L stands for, least. And this is especially important when we're working with fractions, because least common multiple gives us the smallest number that they have in common that we can change into a denominator and compare fractions, and also add fractions, subtract fractions, and some other operations. The way to find the least common multiple with the list method is to simply list the multiples of the numbers you're comparing. Let's go ahead and compare 12 and 18. When I think about a multiple, that number multiple helps me to think of multiply. What numbers do I multiply by 12 to get the multiples? 12 times 1, of course. That gives us our first multiple. 12 times 2 is 24. Times 3 is 36. 48, and so on. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the other number that I'm comparing. I'm going to start with 18 times 1, 18 times 2, and so on. I can already see a common multiple. 36 is common to both lists. And as I continue to multiply, I would find other numbers that were common as well. But like I said, we're looking for the smallest number that they have in common in those lists. So 36 is our least common multiple. Here's the other method for finding least common multiple. This method is called the factor tree method. It's especially effective if you're using larger numbers. The list method is great if you can quickly list out the multiples of a number. But if you have larger numbers to work with, sometimes it can get a little bit complex. So to find the least common multiple of a little bit larger numbers, we'll use the same example, this time 12 and 18. We're going to do a factorization method using the factor tree. You've probably seen this before. We try to come up with the prime numbers that we can multiply out of 12 and 18, and then find some commonality in there to draw up our least common multiple. If you're not sure what the factors are in numbers, you can begin by dividing the number by 2, 3, 5, 7. Try to choose prime numbers under 10 so that you can divide those numbers out, and that will help you to break the numbers down into smaller chunks that are easier to work with. Every time I get a prime number, I'm going to circle it because I'm going to use that prime factor to find my least common multiple. 2 times 6 is 12. 6 can be broken down into 2 times 3. And there's my prime factorization for 12. 2 times 2 times 3. I'm going to do the same thing to 18 and compare. 2 times 9. 9 can be broken down into 3 times 3. And here's where I make the comparison. I'm going to choose buddies, numbers that I see occur in both lists, and write those down first. I have a set of 2's, and I have a set of 3's. Then, to find my least common multiple, I'm going to also use any leftover numbers that I have. This 2, and this 3. Then I'm going to multiply these factors, the common factors first, and then the leftover factors to get my least common multiple. 2 times 3 is 6, times 2 is 12, times 3 is 36. And there is the factor tree method for finding least common multiple. These two methods are a great way to find least common multiple.